And we are live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We have an extra special episode, not only with the theme, but our guests. So, we are continuing our series of collaborations and connections with other shakers and movers in the preparedness and homesteading space in the state of Florida. So, tonight we have our special guest, Mr. Scott Case, aka the Sheepdog. And we are joined by our regular brothers, okay, Brendan and Aaron, the bearded tribalists. So these are very exciting episodes. I did episode 7 with Sam Davis the other night. That's already up on YouTube. That was a great episode. So tonight we have Scott, and then looking forward to tomorrow, we have another extra special guest tomorrow night. So you guys should see these online within the next day or two. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott to get started. Here you go, Scott.
Hi guys, my name is Scott Case. I am in the East Central Florida area, Brevard County, and been prepping since 2008. Had a had a great feeling about having a young guy running for president until I started checking on the background and realized that our government's kind of dysfunctional, and he was the Manchurian candidate. And that was when I started prepping, and that series led to where I am now. Went through all kind of iterations, went through a couple of groups. I know probably all three of you guys were in a 3%er group at one point. My problem with most of the other groups were their vetting was crap, and it was just irresponsible folks that you could not count on them when the stress factor hit. So I kind of went lone wolf for quite a few years, where I had some connections, but I didn't really get involved with anybody else. And then 3 years ago, there's a nice couple that started a mutual assistance group. One of the members reached out to me because they knew I was into prepping and firearms training. And so I joined that group. And having prepped for so long, other people look at you and go, my God, how am I going to get to that point? Mm-hmm. And also, when you've been prepping that long, it's hard to have patience with newbies. So I let my impatience get the better of me, and was ready to leave the group. And one of the members in there, he's actually retired Marine Corps major, and one of the founding members of the group and one of the most active members in the group. He talked me into staying, and I'm glad he did. Not everybody jumps in it the way we do. And so, but over the course of the past 3 years, 25 of the members are all licensed ham operators. They've all had their experience with firearms, food prepping, freeze drying, defensive measures. We have a health and wellness group, and basically the whole setup is committees. It's okay. I'm on the self-defense and comms committee. So I kind of head that up. And then we have others that are with the health and wellness committee and the food preparation and storage committee. And then we also have food production, which is just now starting to take off, because I think everybody realizes in a long-term situation, that's really how it's going to go down. And so it's coming along. It's great. There's about 40 members of the group. 25 of them hardcore, 26 of them hardcore, that are very involved and want to learn. And I think after the election, a lot of people there was a collective sigh, and they thought, "Oh, we're good to go." Yeah. No, not really. Especially if you guys saw the thing where the two Chinese professors were trying to bring in the bioagent. Yeah. So it's a constant. I think that being aware is a big deal. My family thought I was crazy for you. My wife thought I was crazy. She says, "You're crazy," until 2020, and then she says, "I'm glad you're crazy." So so you don't feel alone. We actually had a bonfire at my place a couple of months ago, and I was able to relate to the other people in the group. Hey, I'm so happy and content because I don't feel like the Lone Ranger guy here, and it's a good feeling, knowing that people have your back.
Oh yeah. Well, the more I speak with people, the more I see, commonalities. And, a lot of people I run into, they've been prepping for a large part of their adult life. But really, the transition point seems to have been either the 2008 election for some, but even more so for 2020.
Yeah.
Where I think 2008 was really more of a psychological change for some people, you know, the shift in politics. I think President Obama was really the first populist president that we had. And I think that challenged a lot of the ideology in people as individuals, and which we see a lot of with President Trump, because he's a populist as well. Different things that they're seeking and the way they operate, but they're both populist, and they changed forever, in my opinion, the way politics are going to occur. Um, but the real life, like FTX, was 2020. I mean, all of us here, I'm sure Brendan and I have shared many stories about 2020, and it was a catalyst for me to move from lone wolf prepper to, hey, I'm meeting people and I'm making it happen. So a lot of your normies, oh, it'll never happen. They got flipped in 2020. Now, that's not to say that some people said once things calmed down and we reopened, especially in Florida, because we reopened before pretty much everybody else, where they started to get a little bit more comfortable. And, like you mentioned earlier with Trump's second election, a lot of people just, pulled back in their chair. And I think part of it is psychologically, they're like, hey, things will be better. He's going to fix everything. But I think a lot of it is because of fatigue. It's prepper fatigue. I mean, you can only go so long on adrenaline, or fear, all the chemicals that, whether they're good or bad, to hit your brain. If you don't stop and switch gears, it impacts you physically. So I think that's a big thing with people.
The cortisol's a killer.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think that absolutely, because they're looking at people like us and going, "Oh my God, I need to get there." Well, that ain't happening in 5 years.
yeah,
It takes a decade in my opinion,
yeah.
to
Well,
to to figure it out and get your ducks in a row.
yeah. Where we have an advantage is that we've been doing this for a long time, and we've learned along the way. We've made our mistakes and corrected, evolved, just did it better. Where even if you had the financial means, I mean, you could go buy a bunch of stuff, but you have no, and I don't want to say skills per se, uh, like precision, like running a rifle or doing Krav Maga. It's just the skills of being in preparedness to know
Yeah.
what you don't know. And so you can have all the money in the world and you could pay some consultant, build you a bunker, or, just give you a year supply of mountain house for your whole family or whatever, or you go buy a bunch of gear. But if you don't have, if you hadn't had the suffering and the L's, so to speak, by doing this, you didn't learn any lessons. So
The psychological component, a lot of people I think neglect.
yeah. And what do you guys think, Aaron and Brendan? You guys want to chime in on that? Brendan.
I'll let Brennan go first there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So separating the psychological. So Dom, I know I've shared with you. I don't know if we've talked about it on a podcast, but so like 2020 happened, we shut our gates. We didn't know, in the beginning, nobody knew what was going on. Weren't sure. Okay, is this the flu or is this the next plague? So we shut our gates and we lived off the property. I left for work. The wife and kids stayed home. We just ate the animals on our property and out of our garden. We made it, I think it was 21 months before we butchered our last animal. And then that was my, okay, cool, we can do this, but like we need people, we need something else, because 21 months is great, but it's only 21 months. That was when we really started doubling down. Same thing. My wife was, I'm crazy. That's his hobby. And then a woman swung on her at Dollar General over a pack of toilet paper, and she called me and said, "You were right." And I just cherish those words. So
we don't get them often.
Yeah, I was gonna say, 'cause you don't hear it much.
but I
make a chalk mark on the wall.
I had this weird thing with that moment. You know, you talk about like the psychological aspect of it. I was like, haha, I was right. You know, I almost feel justified in all of it. But then the realization of, oh crap, I was right. You know, it's like, all right, this is game time. And we did, realistically, the fear lasted about a month. And then after that, it just kind of turned into an experiment. How far can we go? And I think we did really well. We built the farm back up since then. We built the food storage back up since then. You were talking about new guys. A lot of the times come in and they freak out. It's like, oh, I don't have 10 years worth of food and 10,000 rounds of ammo. And it's like, you don't need that right now. So I do, me and Aaron were actually talking about this yesterday, I believe it was. Same concept, we just call it different things. I call it baselines, right? So one man's ceiling is another man's floor. So start, all right, get 30 days of food, get a tourniquet, get a defensive handgun, get 3 days of water storage. Okay, you've got all that. Now you're going to do 90 days of food, a week of water, you know, so on and so forth. Get your just incrementally increase. You get that morale boost. Ooh, I've got 90 days of food. I'm getting somewhere. Now you're excited. You're going to just build it up, and then it's going to snowball effect to where eventually within, a year's time, if you're doing rice, corn, and beans, you can put away one person's calories for an entire year for $600, which $600 right off the bat is a lot of money. That's $50 a month, if my math is right there.
Yeah.
So if you can throw away, just throw $50 a month at it within a year, you have an entire year's worth of calories for one person, so it's not, impossible. It's very doable, but it's definitely that whole, how do you eat an elephant? Everyone's looking at the elephant. They don't realize, okay, it's one bite at a time. There's a build up to it. So that psychological factor is definitely a thing. I've talked to some people who, and I'm sure all of us have come across this. People will only focus on the firearms and ammunition, and they won't focus on food because they think the roving bands of zombies are going to come take your 3 cans of soup. And it's like, buddy, if you've got nothing to guard, you've got nothing to guard. Like, you don't need 10,000 rounds of ammo, an AR, and a plate carrier if you have zero food. Everybody wants to be the operator running around in all their kit, but hey, we need a gardener. You were talking earlier about setting up like you're in the food production stage. I love that. That's my stuff. Like, feel free to get a hold of me. I have so many notebooks full of notes and different plants and their caloric intake, what it takes to grow them, what seasons to grow them in our area. Get a hold of me about that stuff. I nerd out on that. Food production.
That's a crucial component that many people just neglect.
Well,
I don't think it's sunk in yet.
Yeah, just on a basic level, right? So I use the math of 3,200 calories per person per day. I use that because that's what the U.S. Army had come to the conclusion. That's what a military-age male under strenuous activity to not lose muscle mass. So running off that number within a 400 square foot garden, you can grow one person's entire calories for a year in that garden and then some with proper diligence. It's not as hard as people think, but it has its own technical learning curves. It's definitely something that needs to be, like, you get a lot of people who's like, oh, well, I've got, a Ziploc bag full of seeds, and when the world ends, I'm just going to plant it. And I'm like, well, first off, probably 80% of those are going to be duds. And then if
found that out the hard way.
Yeah. If you get 20% to live, how many are you going to kill? So every year we get a little better, but there's still mistakes being made. Last year, I think I planted probably 2 dozen okra seeds. I got 50%, as that made it to mature plants, but if you're, that's nothing compared to the first year. If I planted 2 dozen the first year, I might have got 4, so that's not something you want to learn at the worst day of your life while you're also guarding, because you may or may not have people, while you're also trying to take care of your own sanitation and your family, because, hey, guess what? Everyone thinks that, like, for some reason we live in America, so old world diseases don't happen. No, old world diseases don't happen here because we have running water and soap. And that's just not something that's common everywhere else. My wife's a neat freak. Do you guys have 10 cases of bleach and Dawn in your shed? I do, because my wife's in charge of sanitation. My wife's Haitian. She has the unfortunate aside of she's had siblings die of relatively novel things here in America. Not, they didn't die in America, but they died from something that wouldn't be anything to us because we have the access to what we have. So my wife she's in charge of sanitation for a reason. But it's that experience that comes along with it,
Yeah, and that's a great example. When I was referring to earlier, even if someone had all the stuff, they didn't have, the struggle. And so, like with the gardens, I mean, I don't garden. That's one of my holes. But I mean, if you're doing that at your house, you got to do it season after season, so you learn your soil and know how to upgrade it and treat it. And then what if you have to go somewhere else? At least you have some experience to be able to kind of read the soil and to see what's going to be possible to grow there and not waste your seeds. Because once you get into an emergency situation, supply lines are done. All we got is what we got. And so beyond the duds, now we're just like, we just can't waste stuff. So hopefully, like when we do podcasts like this and people that are, just starting out, or still playing lone wolf, they understand this, and then they get with people and, collaborate with community and learn the different things. That's one of the things that we do well, within our network, because where Brendan is strong, okay, I'm not, and vice versa, so, and then, Aaron coming around and stuff, he's been a wealth of knowledge. Great
just because I made a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah. We just learned from all the things he did wrong.
Yeah.
That's the best lesson when you get kicked in the teeth. You don't forget that.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you don't have to spend the money that I spent learning that I was doing it wrong.
Yeah, so true.
That's the box of shame for firearms gear. Yeah, got one of those.
Dude, I just upgraded my tote size for all the holsters I may use again one day. From the 4 boxes it was in to now I'm up to a 55 quart tote, and I'm still coming across stuff that it may end up being a 27-gallon tote before it's all said and done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. I use it for display. If for the group, then when we do a firearms day, I'll take it and just throw it all out on the table and say, well, if anybody needs something out of here, they think this is going to work for them, take it and get it out of my hair, so my wife doesn't go, why did you buy that? You never used it.
I do something similar, but it's more like, when we're at a training event, I'll have a bunch of loaner gear, and then people get to put it under a little bit of pressure, and they start seeing the holes. Because, if they've been marketed to by a popular holster maker, they'll start telling you about their opinion based on all the ad copy they've read. And, if you sound like an advertisement for Crossbreed or We the People holsters, and you just got your CCW license and you're still trying to figure out if you're going to carry all the time, maybe we should get a little bit of hands-on experience. Then you can figure out why this has been in a tote at my house for the last 3 years.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, but it looked good when I bought it. That's,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've still got 3 Serpa holsters for guns that I don't even own, because we did a series on destruction testing those, and we found out the biggest thing in Florida was that for the little button safety on there, if you get fine-grained sand in it, it will freeze and it will lock the whole gun up in the holster. And our record is it took 3 guys to get that a Glock 19 out of a level 2 Serpa. So then we figured out how to gator roll them and just peel the clamshell apart, and they can come out real easy then.
Yeah.
I was like, don't break my $60 holster. I was like, dude, you couldn't pay me $60 to carry with this thing.
All those lessons learned. Well, Scott, earlier you mentioned about, your different committees, and it sounds like you guys do a lot of delegation there, which is pretty good. You don't see that a lot, especially with smaller groups.
We found that because my skill set was with firearms training. I'm an instructor and trainer and aficionado with firearm stuff. So it was kind of a natural for me for that. And the comms, I took that on because we realized, and I expressed this to you the other night when we were talking, we pulled out that dusty Baofeng out of the go bag and said, okay, let's really need to work on the comms now, because, well, I think it was right after AT&T took a crap for the whole day, 24-hour period. And so let's start working on it. And we realized how inadequate we really were in that department. So I spearheaded that. Now 26 of our group are ham licensed, and we're doing bi-weekly check-ins with the group and on the radio, so everybody gets used to using it. We do switch the channels. We run on some repeaters. We're running on SARNet, so they get used to handling it. It's just like firearms. If you don't use it or train with it, then you really kind of suck.
Yeah.
So that was my gig. Now we've got a lady in our group that she experiments with all kinds of plants. Like you, Brendan. She's really probably got the same kind of gig going on with 50 notebooks on all the failures, and mainly, okay, this is how we failed, so they breed success. And then we've got one gentleman in our group that has an actual food forest on his property, and it's amazing. I'll have to do a video tour of it if it'll let me, and I'll share it with you guys. Truly amazing the amount that produces on a 1/4 acre lot.
That's awesome.
It's phenomenal. Yeah. And then for health and wellness, we've got a lady in the group that runs a holistic store, and she actually got us into the Rife technology, using the resonant frequencies to heal, and quite amazing the capabilities of that thing. And then we've got another guy I get a lot of engineers in my group because I live on the Space Coast. So I hate to say they're smart guys, but not all of them are hands-on kind of guys. And so, don't laugh at him. It's just the way it is, man.
When we moved back from Spain, my granddad was pastoring a church over in a place called Titusville, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So I've gone to church barbecues with literal rocket scientists who have to probably had someone assist them tying their shoes, but their knowledge on actual rocket fuel, because they could make it in their garage if they so chose was unparalleled. But
Well,
you want
yeah,
to
I
talk
mean,
about not hands-on or theoretical? Yeah,
they're all smarter than me, no doubt. But it's just my experience with hands-on, shines through on some of the other stuff. That's all. And so, yeah, we've done like we'll do field days, hand drilling a well. We'll do field days. Let's test edible plants. Let's look at Florida. 87% of the plants will kill you, basically. So you really need to know what to eat. And then we did field days with the comms. We're walking around out in the woods, some overland navigation, that kind of stuff. And it's really good. You get the group together. Everybody's used to working together, and you figure out the I won't say command structure, but you figure out who's taking point on things by doing those days. So you don't have to figure that out if things get ugly.
Figuring out a hierarchy, kind of like horizontally, really, and see who's a natural fit for one thing or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, and it's worked good for us so far. Obviously, it's evolving. We got a couple of new members that are coming in, and basically most of the members are couples, husband, wife. Some of them have kids, young kids, but the bulk of the folks are. I'm 59. The bulk of the folks are 50 to 65 range. Some in the 40s, and I think we've got two that are under 40. But that's just it's a broad range. Some with kids, some without, and it's a Christian based group. So we try to stick with those principles as much as we can. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the conflicted card series.
Yeah.
Some interesting stuff. My wife was real hesitant for me to bring those out of the group, just because of this. Some of the questions that are on there and some of the answers that might spill out, So, but yeah, it's coming along. Would I like it to be bigger? Yeah. And would I like everybody to participate more? Yeah. But you just have to be patient with people.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you guys got some good structure. You got some quality people. And like any organization, there's always going to be some that contribute more or more interested in others. But it's nice to have those additional people that when emergency does happen and the environment changes, it'll motivate them to be more engaged. That's such a natural thing in this space. Some people's interest is just depending on how crazy it is outside or where their fear factor is. And everyone has their different reasonings, their trigger points. What political event is happening? Wow, that's nothing. That's a nothing burger. Well, this is going to happen. It's going to make all the difference. So everyone's just got to pick their poison.
So we have one of our members is an actual rocket scientist. He works at Blue Origin, and he was kind enough to take us on a tour last week. Amazing, just absolutely amazing. But he tells his stories about being in Africa and traveling in convoys, avoiding minefields. Really, just things that we in the United States. What do you mean a mine? There's a in this area they've got signs and don't go off the side of the road if you break down. And it really was it's a different. Maybe that might prepare him better for things that go down. I don't know, but it's interesting to hear his stories and the different life that people live there and lead there.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it would be great for Americans to have the opportunity to travel overseas. And I don't mean, hey, let me go spend 3 days in Rome as a tourist. I mean, I've been to Peru and Venezuela. I've been to Mexico. Every one of those environments was different. I mean, when I was in Peru, that was the first time that I ever experienced armed checkpoints. guys with machine guns. I mean, coming around, looking at your car, looking under, asking you questions. And I was not a native speaker, but I was with somebody that was bilingual, so it helped. But that was a female. But if those guys were going to be, unscrupulous, there was nothing I could have done. One, I wasn't able to carry over there, and I'm going to compare it to these guys with machine guns. When I've traveled to Mexico, I mean, just operating in Tijuana, all the cops make very little money, so it's not even a question of the moral foundation of these people. They're poor in their country,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, because the government doesn't pay them, and the government allows them to sit there and just do nefarious things to, informally tax other people to survive. And you have poor people here in the United States. It's nothing compared to other countries. Brendan's wife, she's from Haiti. I know Aaron's done mission trips, so I'm sure they even have, more realistic or more what's the word? More value-centric stories than mine. Mine was mild compared to what so many other people experience. And I think that was
from Argentina. It's very much a third world country.
Yeah, and
Argentina's got some nice places though. Like I went to Mar del Plata and like Buenos Aires, and Bariloche was one of the more beautiful places I'd seen. Like that also had the hands down the best food of anywhere that I have ever been that's not the U.S.
Yeah, that's why when my mother-in-law comes to visit, I gain 10 pounds. Yeah.
Well, there's steak with everything, right? I mean, you eat your steak with a side of steak over there and red wine. But
yeah, it's almost a natural carnivore diet, Brendan. You everything, man.
Yeah, there's some little some places over there that are that have exceptions. Like in Bariloche, you can get really, really good German beer, and you just don't ask why all the blonde-haired, blue-eyed people are living in Argentina and have been since right after World War II.
Yeah, well, it's just Germans, Italians, and Swiss. I mean, that's really the bulk of the Argentinians, and most people don't realize that they're thinking, Colombia, or Venezuela, but it's not. It's much different. So, and they all, I think, what do they say is the Argentinians sing when they talk. They're all Italians. You want to shut my wife up, you grab her hands. She can't talk. So.
Well, one of the most interesting things that I learned by going to South America and traveling there is that there's basically two different types of people in each one of the countries. There's your native Indian tribe people, okay, and then there's the descendants of the Europeans. And some have mixed with the natives and some have not. And you still have the same kind of, I don't know what the right analogy is, with the rich and poor, it's class.
Caste system, like a caste system. Yeah, very much so.
And I remember when I was in Peru and we were taking the train up to Machu Picchu, and I'm seeing all these little Peruvian kids running around, and they got their little parochial uniforms on. That was strange to me. And they're all little chunky kids. No one was starving. It wasn't like you see on TV about poor people. And the girl I was like, what's up with that? How is that even a thing? And she's like, what? Just 'cause they're farmers, so they're fat. They have lots of food, And, if you're getting education there, it's a little bit more structured, it seems. And they're, having it's not like what you see on TV, basically, is the point I'm trying to make. So it was an eye-opening experience to me. So when I went to Lima, she lived in an area that was called Miraflores, which was a more well-to-do area versus Lima proper, like where her sister had lived. And culturally, it was just different. I mean, the malls were in buildings that were like towers. Like we'll have a mall that might be two floors, three tops if you're in a bigger city. And these buildings were like 4, 5, 6 stories high. And then everyone was going to the mall. They're dressing up like they're going out to the club. And just culturally, it was just so different. But I think my point being is that if Americans were able to experience other countries in that sense, to live amongst the people, they could appreciate and value the opportunities that we have here in this country, and maybe live a better lifestyle with what we have versus the disparity we have where people just spend their money like there's no tomorrow. Everything is consumables. It's just no saving, no building up for anything, which I think is part of why people don't prepare. Is the long point that I'm trying to get is they don't want to sacrifice, going out to the club or getting a new outfit or whatever the case may be. So,
Just the average American household has 3 days worth of food.
yeah.
So if you're lucky,
if you're lucky, day 4 is going to be ugly.
Yeah.
I mean, what I don't ever want my child to say, "Daddy, I'm hungry." So what would you do to feed your kid? And that's an ugly question to have to think about.
Yeah. We've had that conversation many times, me and Brendan and Aaron and other people. And sometimes it's hard to contemplate in the time of plenty. It really kind of questions your moral character. But I think all of us that have children and family, we need to prepare ourselves psychologically that we're going to make choices that we can't even fathom right now. That doesn't mean we have to be nefarious, but we just are not going to have as much patience and compassion for all the people around us. And, not everyone is going to be able to win, is the point that I make with that. So
your unprepared neighbor is the biggest danger you face, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. So, bravo on your communications network. That is something that's even more rare in groups that I've encountered, where you guys have so many people that are licensed and are actually practicing it. I think that's great. That's something that all groups should replicate in some form or fashion. Doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it's definitely something to replicate. And because, we have all the cell phones and the cell towers, but if we learn anything from 9/11, you could still have power, but everyone's calling at the same time, the system becomes overloaded. And that is exactly what's going to happen in any kind of an emergency situation in any area across the United States. So at least
shut it down.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to get overwhelmed, and then they're going to shut it down for priority traffic. So,
or just shut it down to stop secondary stuff being triggered. That happened after the Boston bombing. Google had to set up a website so people could talk with family members and let them know that they were okay. But they blacked out most of during the Boston Marathon. They blacked out most of that city because they were worried about cell phones being used to trigger secondary devices.
Yeah.
I would think about that. That's true.
Yeah, and I would guess that the government has probably made arrangements with the telcos to at least have dedicated circuits. Just like in your house, you can sit there and shut off everything, just turn on certain circuits, and only certain things can get plugged in. Maybe you have phones with special chips or special SIM cards that you pop in there, and that you can access the towers, because it's all software. So they don't have to physically unplug the cell towers. They can just flip some switches and everyone just can't connect. That's probably more practical than trying to give everybody in the government sat phones. I know there was a story. Oh, God, when was it? A couple of years ago, they started issuing sat phones to people, to government employees.
I remember that.
That's not really a cost-effective thing. Not that the government ever does anything cost-effectively, but logistically, it's probably very challenging. But I wouldn't be surprised with some of the things they can do with telecommunications these days. And Aaron, what about you? I know you're always digging into all kinds of different information about things.
In regards to what specifically? I'm an information junkie and I love to learn. So,
what I'm talking about here. So, like, telecommunications, we're dedicated for the government.
Yeah, so I have some friends that work in the back end of the telecom industry, specifically on the cybersecurity side, and most of the conversations that I've had with them, I tend to be a little skeptical of when people talk about the competence of the government because I was in the Army for 3 years. And, talking about super secret spy gear that they can put their special SIM card in and, get past their blanket jamming. Um, we're also talking about the same organization that brought us all the competence and efficiency of the DMV. So, you know, thinking about it from that perspective, like I was listening to one of the earlier podcast episodes today, and you were talking about mil spec stuff as like a standard you want to aspire to. I've known so many grunts that got screwed over by crappy gear because the mil spec procurement process is extremely graft driven and lobbyist driven.
Mil spec is
And
just the cheapest bidder.
Yeah.
well, it's not even it's not even necessarily the cheapest bidder because it could be a bidder who's way over the top, but he offered the general in charge of that procurement program a nice little consulting gig, after retirement. And then, General Smith over here is going to be able to go over and, he's going to have his third house in the Caymans and be able to support, 4 mistresses now. He will have really arrived. He just needs to sign off on, this Raytheon contract. So with stuff like that, I mean, I tend to look at a lot of the active shooter stuff and the Boston bombing stuff. Is a really great example of one of those rapid mass casualty events, and then see what the government response was, and then see what lessons they've learned over the years or haven't. Brendan, you were talking about going to North Carolina, and some of the other states that were affected by Milton and Helene. Did you see anything there to give you the impression that the government had developed an efficient and cohesive communication strategy for crisis times?
So I've talked about this one a couple of times, but I anytime I can evangelize FEMA, I will. So FEMA showed up on, let's see, day 9 of the storm, day 9 after the storm, in their nice little pressed collared shirts and pants, and the entirety of them doing their work was, at least in our case, showing up. How many people do you have here? How much material are you moving through? How many donations? How much money are you operating? Okay, cool. This is a FEMA site now. Give us all that info. We're going to log it. So didn't have, I've never had good experiences with FEMA. I've had more than a couple incompetent experiences and then 1 or 2 straight up malicious. As far as the comms goes, so it's not uncommon with the organization that I volunteer with. When we go in, we're in before cell towers are up. We're in before internet is up most of the time. So we've got one guy who his whole job when he gets in, he sets up a Starlink. In Helene, he had 2-meter ham radio. He had CB running. He had a GMRS on 50 watts running. And then I am not a ham guy, so if I say something wrong, all the ham guys are going to freak out, but it's cool. I think 70 centimeter, something like that. He had 4 or 5 different versions of radio, and we had 24-hour monitoring. And with that, we were able to get into a town called Little Germany, where one guy had a Baofeng, and he knew his local repeater, and he just bounced off until we were able to pick him up. The road, it's a tiny little town up in a mountain holler that had one road in and one road out, and the road washed away for 200 yards. So it was like 8 or 9 days before they were able to get the signal out. And we were able to, there's actually videos online where I forget the one guy's name, Johnny something. He's out of Johnson City. Johnny B, I think it is. Him and TJ, Bear Independent, straight up, like, we attached rope points and you had to track along the side of the cliff with rope because the roads have just washed completely off the mountain. That deployment had sold me on radios. I always kind of brushed it off of, I don't really need them. I use GMRS. I have some Baofangs. I have some higher quality stuff that I use for the deployments because that's standard ongoing on the deployments I do. And then we also use them around the property here. But that was always my thought. If I just need to communicate with the people who I'm working around and compete the people who I'm on property with. After having that experience with watching what they did with the ham radios and the CBs and the GMRS base stations and all that, that was wizardry to me, and that has completely sold me on that stuff.
Yeah.
The most of the first responder stuff is trunked.
Mm-hmm.
So when the internet takes a crap, so does their communication, and which is I never understood the thought process there. But there's a repeater on Mount Mitchell that a lot of the comms, and probably your guy was bouncing off that a lot. That was the main source of contact for the whole area. And Gribbly, there's a guy Gribbly on YouTube, and he did a 6 months post-storm review on what he had, what he didn't have, what he wished he'd had, and what he didn't really need. And pretty interesting. It was a very good. It was worth watching twice. Let me put it that way. And but man, it was brutal. But the comms were, it was a big deal.
I never thought of it that way. So one thing I tell people, like bug out bags and things of that nature, everybody makes one. Everybody's got one. That's what, like, we live out of 3-day packs when we go on the deployments. Now we got a fob that we set up, and then we can replenish from there. But I tell people all the time, if you want to go on one of those deployments, take your bug out bag, live only out of that bug out bag for 3 days. That's your beautiful, it's a real world scenario. You find out pretty freaking quick okay, this is useless. This is great. My rule of thumb, if I don't touch something after 2 deployments, it comes out and I replace it with something else, usually food. Most of my bag is calories and electrolytes.
The rest goes in the box of shame. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I didn't think about that for radios. Some things you might just not need or whatever, or upgrade, or that stuff's still wizardry to me.
Everybody makes fun of the Baofangs, but I mean, for I've got 6 of them. I have my personal radio is a Yaesu. That's a VX6, so it's tri-band. But they're great little radios. They'll run GMRS, FRS, and ham frequencies.
Yeah.
Weather, everything. So it's a good do-all radio. And if it falls over the side of the boat or off the trail or whatever, I'm not heartbroken.
Yeah. They're inexpensive, and Amazon's always running like little kit deals with extended antennas, extra battery, and what have you. And this is where your lone wolf guy and your leadership guy differentiate. Your lone wolf guy might have 1, maybe 2 Baofangs. Okay. What good is 1 radio? I mean, you might be able to listen to some people, maybe hit a repeater, but if no one on the other end that you want to talk to has 1, it's kind of useless. But you got to have 6 to 10 of them if you're going to sit there and follow like my rule of thumb, and to organize your neighborhood, people in your household. So even if you're just taking care of your family and you got your immediate family and some of your in-laws or some of your neighbors, people are evacuating to your house. People got to be awake. They got to take a look around the property. It's good to go and walk down the street a little bit. Batteries got to be charged, so stuff gets broken or lost. You want to bring people into the fold. So it makes sense to build up kits with these Baofangs. You want to spend the money on a Yaesu? Cool, go ahead. Let that be your golden, go-to device. But have the Baofeng kits for people around you. And because you may not have the crew now, but everyone's going to be in the same boat in an emergency, and people are going to be more motivated, and you're going to have to be a little bit more tolerant too, and be able to, like I like to say, scale from zero. Even if you got
will be determined by proximity.
Yeah, because that's really your crew.
Yeah.
And that can mean writing up some simple direction cards, which have two purposes. One, it forces you to know the device and how to use it to what's important inside and out. And then you got to be able to teach it to somebody and just use it as a learning aid. So you can demo it once or twice. And here's a review card. So when you're killing some time over here because you're on watch or you're waiting, review, practice with the radio. Now you have the time and the necessity to do it.
So one of the things that has paid the most dividends for me over the course of different disasters is making little go kits for friends and neighbors. Some of the stuff I tell people I want it back, like my Baofeng is it's a loaner. If you decide you want to keep that because you have such happy memories, you buy me two to replace it. But little things like hygiene, and then those instructional cards that you were talking about. One of my nephews is 7. So I write down the instruction cards, and I give it to him. And if he can follow the instructions on that for whatever the task is, then I hand it to his mom. And if she can do the same thing, right, and they get no prepping, they get, here's a water purification system, and here's a card. Read the instructions on the 3x5 card, and then follow them and show me what you can do. And I don't say anything while I'm watching it. And that way I know a 7-year-old can do it. And a woman who is very dear to me, but is not very technically inclined. She doesn't give a crap about most stuff that's techie related. She can do it. And I have the added benefit of she usually doesn't want to do this stuff. So if I could get somebody who doesn't want to learn this skill to follow a simple card, like, we pressure tested it, it's awesome.
Oh, that's good stuff.
That's a good. I just made the note for the reference cards there. That's something I'm going to introduce to my group. That's a good idea. I mean, it really makes it easy, especially when you're under stress. Step by step. ABC, and you're good.
Yeah,
it makes it easy for them.
Yeah, and if anyone wanted to be sold on it, just think of this in our own lives, where say there's 10 steps to do stuff, but we know how to do it. And we try to sit there and say, they're like, hey, show me how to do it. Well, we're going to give them step 3, 7, and 10, just because we're past it. So we're just giving them a couple, and we're forgetting that they have no experience. So the cards force us to know it inside and out, but it also makes up for our impatience, because when we sit there and we give them the shorthand how to do it, and then they need more help, we get frustrated. And just think of how many other tasks are going on at that time that we're going to have impatience for. So for any normies, like, why should I do that? Or any lone wolves, right there, just so you don't got to be annoyed with people. Here's your cards, go figure it out. That kind of thing.
That's an easy way.
One of the channels I'd recommend to you, Dominic, and everybody else, it's an older channel that's on YouTube called Analytical Survival. The guy has not been active in quite some time. He had his first child about 8 years ago, but he spent some time in special forces, wearing very exclusive headgear and probably going interesting places and doing cool stuff. But he has some very in-depth videos on family disaster plans and reference cards. And like, here's our comms plan. Here's the contact information that's laminated. Here's what channels we're on. Here's what we're going to do in case of fire. So he literally has it in a binder he shows on his fridge, and everything's laminated, and the kids know they can grab the binder, and if they just need to leave the house real quick or whatever, or his wife needs to leave the house real quick, everything's in that binder for most of the more common disasters. I mean, I'm sure he probably has a nuclear response protocol, but I don't know if I'd have that in there for me.
What's the name of his channel again?
Analytical survival.
Okay.
He was really, really active, and then, like I said, he decided later on in life to go in and start building a family. Some of his information is a little dated. You can see a lot of the gear stuff that he talks about is a little bit dated, but he also has his homeschooling curriculum that he had for his child that he had. So,
Okay.
some pretty cool stuff.
You must say hello and get beat it. Okay.
Oh, man. Yeah, my daughters were here a few minutes ago they're making all kinds of silly faces and stuff over here. So when you saw me moving my hands, I'm flashing a flashlight, go away.
Like being
Yeah. We're getting close to the hour, and there was one topic I wanted to bring up to you, Scott. We started to chat about it a little bit on the pre-call earlier in the week, and you mentioned something about a 16-man rotation. Like how many people?
Yeah. So we were sitting down doing the math. Now, given this is a rough estimate, and actually Brendan's calorie count is something I wrote down, and I'm going to share with the group because that's part of figuring out the optimum people and how many storage you got. But 16 was the number for constant patrol, constant gardening, constant sanitation, constant food prep and cooking, laundry. I mean, all the stuff that you got to do on a daily basis that you can't just throw in the washing machine or you can't do normally. So your 10-minute task turned into an hour task. And so that was kind of the minimum that we calculated was a functional group was 16. No, optimum was like 24.
Wow.
That's a more optimum number.
Yeah.
And cross training. So you've got 3 people who are cross trained to do, like clean the firearms, do service on them, mend gear, work on pumps, for your irrigation or your potable water, that kind of thing. And we haven't gotten to that yet. Sorry, turn that down. We haven't gotten to that yet. We're working on that cross training. The comms part we're pretty close on. And we've been doing some interesting stuff with grounding and bonding too. One of the gents in our ham club used to work on the rolling Humvees, the rolling radio platforms, the Syncos Humvees. And so he shared with me how they do the grounding and bonding on those to help them survive pulses. And so we've been working on our trucks now, bonding them. We've got one completely done. Another one's mine's partially done. And one of our guys, the jarhead, he works for DOD still. And he was working remote, and we thought he was going to have to go back to Washington because they were calling everybody back to the hive, as it were. And luckily he landed a gig over at Patrick because they've got a secure area where he can work. So he didn't have to go back. So we bonded his vehicle first because we thought he was going to have to go up there and work and be away from his family. And so that's on the horizon too. As far as, and there's actually 4 of us that have been working on that. installing radios, mobile radios. I think we're up to 9 vehicles now that have mobile radios installed as well. And so everybody's been helping with that. And when the guys are over here, the ladies are here hanging out, working on dehydrated eggs and things like that. So it's definitely a work in progress. And I think that if things really went south, and part of our component is we have a barrier island here. So half of our group is over on the barrier island. So they face a different problems than we do. Storm surge is the biggest threat to them. And so if there's a storm surge, they're all coming over here. And so we've got it set up in quadrants: northwest, northeast, southeast, southwest. And each one of those quadrants has a radio hub. Like my antenna is it's almost 70 feet in the air, so I can hear everybody. And then we've got a couple more like that have an elevated antenna, so they can hear everybody, because not everybody can communicate. Some of them are still on handhelds, that kind of thing. And so we're figuring it out. We know that if anybody had to come to my house, we've got extra bedding, we've got enough food, and and a way to run the well without electricity or the solar panels. So, but back to the number of people to operate an efficient group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 16. I think the Golden Horde is the Matt Bracken. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. Former Navy SEAL. He wrote an interesting little piece called "When the Music Stops."
Yep.
And did you read that? Yeah, it was on point, and it was pretty ruthless, and it was disturbing. But after reading it and running it through, the hamster wheels up here a bit, it's like, wow, that's just point. That's just spot on. And so it's worth checking out. It's getting harder to find. I think Western Rifle Journal has it still, but it looks like Google was probably trying to weed it out from well, that's what they do. So that was worth a read. And I don't know if you guys have read the Black Autumn series or not.
Oh yeah.
I was very impressed with that. The movie not so much, but the book series was well thought out. Gave me some nuggets, to think about, interesting things to think about. And so yeah, it's an evolution. And we have Bonsai. He's over in St. Cloud there, so he's got an interesting setup there.
Yeah.
And so we're learning from other groups as much as we can, and it's just time. It's just time.
All right. Brendan, you got any last things you want to chat about?
No, not too much. I think we did a good cover.
Yeah. What about you, Aaron? How about you?
Well, no, I think you guys covered everything. With the exception, when I was talking with Brendan the other day about the calories and everything, we were talking about, I have a little bit of a different number that I came up with, and that was 5,000 calories. Because if you talk to the military says that you need 3,200 calories, right? If you talk to any grunt that has deployed to a combat zone, ask them if they ever met somebody who was deployed and doing ops that did not have a bunch of pogey bait on them. Right? That's your little lickies and chewies is, what I've heard them called by some of my Marine buddies. High sugar, high calorie content, everything that's going to put pounds on you in peacetime. Yeah. And you see those guys eat like absolute crap, and they cannot get enough of it.
Yeah.
And then the other one was for the 16 people. We did some with a group I used to be part of. We did a study, and we found that kind of 30 was our magic number. Because when you look at infection rates and disease rates, in the last 2 years, there was a breakout of Legionnaire's disease in Ocala. And it started in the prison systems because it's a state prison and we move people all over the place in state prisons. When was the last time that you heard of Legionnaire's disease happening in the first world? Right.
I
So,
can't even remember.
yeah, stuff like, we had cholera outbreaks during the Obama administration when he was bringing in 50,000 immigrants at a whack from multiple countries, and installing them in places like rural Tennessee or the Great Lakes area in, Minneapolis, Minnesota. So, having people recovering from injuries and also recovering from diseases and sicknesses, and something you've talked about on the podcast before, Dominic, um, in sustained operations where you don't have a place to really recuperate, you might have people start showing signs of mental fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And that person may not be as much of a go-getter as they normally are because they had to shoot 6 hungry dads who were coming for your food, and he made the decision that it was your kids or theirs, and he picked that, but it doesn't mean he's going to feel good about that decision.
Yeah.
So he might not be your hardest worker anymore. So just some thoughts on that for man hours, and running a camp in a group. And that's why the lone wolf stuff, like having those little kits that you can give to people, you may not be able to get 30 people together to do this kind of stuff and maintain focus on it.
Yeah.
But if you know who's worth a crap in your area, and you can say, here's a Baofeng. I've run this through a 7-year-old and a very bored, disinterested housewife, and they both understood these directions. So let me know which one that you are not as smart as, and we'll address whatever your issue is with that. Here's some sanitation stuff. Here's I'm real big on having loaner security gear for my buddies, because I like to sleep occasionally, and I can't. I've tried curing sleep, and stuff just won't leave. So, just some quick thoughts.
Yeah, no, those were good points. All right, Scott, what about you?
I'm glad I set in on this because that does give me another calculation there. I mean, just dysentery alone could take out half your group and keep them incapacitated for a week. Glued to a bucket somewhere.
If they survive it, yeah.
If they survive it, I mean, if there's no way to hydrate them, I mean, it's a whole different world. And so yeah, it gives you pause to think about all the things. And I do, as far as the kits, the loaner kits, some of my neighbors here where I'm at now, I have given radios, programmed them, done that kind of thing. Have a couple single ladies here to help them, but also in a selfish interest where they might be able to tell me if there's an intrusion in the neighborhood by the radio. Hey, and give me some warning. So that's, thinking about it there. But yeah, there's a couple people in the neighborhood that I probably, or in the area that I could probably benefit from, or my group could, by giving them that and bringing them into the fold, as it were. I mean, they won't be trained up, obviously, but if it's a stout body that's competent and capable, I can work with that.
Yeah. So as long as they have a purpose, so just giving them the radio kit, okay, that doesn't mean you give them a gun or anything else. That's a listening post.
Yeah. Yep.
And it lets you start to evaluate and vet them by action, and then they start being and some people will be appreciative, and then they'll be eager, and then you give them another task, so you're not giving them all your, it's not like having a full range of kit for every possible person. You give him tasks and then you move it up, give him something else, and then you give somebody else the LP position, and when those other neighbors see that this person is helping out and is getting a little help from you, well, oh, how can I help? So I think that kind of feeds into it in a good way. Take control of your neighborhood. You know, it doesn't have to be like Negan. You know, for our Walking Dead fans. You know. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, guys. This has been a great conversation. We literally could have kept talking another hour, 2 hours, but trying to keep this down to close to an hour. But that just gives more opportunities to have everyone back on again, because there's always something else to talk about. All right. For all those out there, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please stay tuned for our upcoming episode after this with another special guest and all the future episodes. Also, we have an event that's coming up on June 21st in Missouri, K-Town, up at the Crimson Sky Ranch. It's going to be a DIY solar generator build. You can either buy stuff from the parts list and build with Sam. He's going to be the subject matter expert on that day, and you take that home, or you can just watch and ask questions and learn something, and then on your own in the future, you go and you build yourself up something. We'll also have a potluck, and we'll have an afternoon presentation by Cindy, who's Sam's co-host over at the Florida Prepping Hub, and she'll be doing medicinal tinctures. I've been to one of their events before, and it was pretty cool. So it's worth coming out. And I will see you all next time. You guys have a great rest of your week. Be safe. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to like and subscribe and share with your friends. We will see you next time.